it again?
What?
You said?
By a show of hands, how many of you out there know what type of government the United States has? Now, how many of you were going to say either democracy or representative democracy or something along those lines? In all honesty, the United States is not a democracy. The United States is an oligarchy.
In the same way that I'm a horse, the United States is democracy. It is simply a cover over what we actually are practicing as a political system. According to the Federal Election Commission, the 2012 presidential race was almost a third of the funds were raised for all candidates was raised by donors that donated more than $2,000 at a time. According to the 2012 Presidential Campaign Finance Explorer from the Washington Post, President Obama spent $1.11 billion to be elected. He was the first president ever to spend over $1 billion on his campaign. Now, when we look towards the practice of petitioning Congress, which is a constitutional right that we have, we generally think of it to be as our right to have speech, our right to speak to our congressman, our right to have our voice heard. However, this is simply not the case. As a practice, lobbyists take advantage of the right to petition Congress and spend money towards getting their voice heard. They take the ear of congressmen. We don't actually have representatives in office. Secondly, the right to petition Congress is not something where you can get your voice heard. If you don't have money, you don't have a way to get the ear of your politicians, and you don't have a way to have your voice heard in the democratic process. However, the right to petition Congress, if we were to lose that right, we wouldn't actually be losing anything. All we would be doing is taking money out of the politics, because there would be no way to have your voice heard when you're giving money to a politician. Politicians would only get money simply because someone agreed with what they said, instead of because they wanted something out of them. According to a quote by Paul Vermeth of the Huffington Post, 2012 election was the most expensive in history, with a price tag of more than $6 billion. The first $70 million Senate campaign and the first $20 million House candidate. For even the non-record-breaking political candidates, the election gets more and more expensive and less transparent. As a result, candidates spend more time raising money from big dollar donors. Now, if we were to lose the right to petition Congress, your voice would be heard during the elections, because that would be the only time when you were actually presenting yourself forward to say, this is who I want in office, these are the ideas I want to be represented, and you'd be voting based on platforms instead of whoever has the most money wins the election. Now, you might say that you could put forward different plans, such as term limits or whatnot. However, candidates that are in office are currently being bribed and being paid for to be in office by the corporations and whatnot, because they want to continue to stay in office. They want the lobbyists there because it allows them to continue to be reelected. So to present something like term limits is not something that's a viable option, because it's simply not something that the people in power are going to let happen, because they are currently in power, and why would they change that? They're not going to vote themselves out of office. It just doesn't make sense. Secondly, you might present something like campaign funding limits, which would be a viable option and, in all honesty, would work very well. However, even with that, you would still have the local people that might have great ideas, might have great platforms, that can't get elected because the lobbyists would still be giving that maximum amount, and they would still be having, because they could still take the ears of the congressman and say, okay, here's your budget, this is the full budget you can have, go ahead, run your campaign. So it would be a better alternative, but it would not be perfect. The right to petition Congress and voluntarily giving it up and electing or voting against it would be the most viable option to end the corruption in our government, and would really be the only way to have our voices heard as the electorate. Thank you.